Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us on PAVE's 100th virtual panel. My name is Tara Andringa, and I'm the Executive Director of PAVE. We are so excited. We've been doing this for 100 weeks, and for the amazing guests we've had, and we've been having fun exploring the AV ecosystem, and thank you to all of you for tuning in. We are super excited for our 100th episode to welcome Raquel Urtasun, the CEO of Waabi, and looking forward to a great conversation. Raquel, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Sarah. I'm really excited to be here today, joining you in such a special occasion as the 100th anniversary of these panels.
Wonderful. Well, we will dive right in. First, why don't you just kind of get to know you and let the audience get to know you. Can you tell us just a little bit about your background and how you got into the AV field?
Yeah, of course. Let's see. So, more than 20 years ago, I guess I got exposed to AI, and I fell in love at first sight, as an undergrad. And since then, it's been really my passion. And more than 10 years ago, I got to play a little bit with self-driving, and it was more of an application at the time of just some of the technology that I was developing. And, it was, it's such a fascinating topic from the perspective of, I wanted to do something that will really transform the world. And, really, this technology has, enormous capabilities on that front. At the same time, I wanted to work on something that was challenging, as a researcher, right, was something that was really important for me as well. And, this is a field where the solution doesn't exist yet, right? So definitely there is a lot of need for innovation. And the other piece was that, unfortunately, I know too many people that have had, severe traffic accidents. So I really have a personal, I would say, depth in terms of, I really want to bring safety to our roads. So that was, more than 10 years ago. And, I was an academic as a professor for many, many years. And then I joined Uber as chief scientist and head of R&D, because yes, in academia, you can't really get exposed to really solve the important problems of self-driving. I needed to really be embedded within, one of these big programs to really understand what are the remaining challenges. And since then, I learned a lot about the industry. We developed fantastic technology. And the more that, I work in this industry, the more that I saw that there is a generation of technology that I call the previous generation that is having difficulties really get to the finish line. And it's not clear whether it will get there, right? So then I decided to, that it should be a different type of technology moving forward. This should be an AI-first approach. And the best way to start afresh is to start a new company. And that's how we get into Waabi, which is, really the culmination of my, 25 years career.
It's amazing, and you're right that there are so many possibilities for the technology. It's so exciting. But with that, we'd love to hear more about Waabi. What was the gap in the industry that you saw a need to fill? And can you just share kind of a little bit about what you do and your mission?
Yeah, of course. So if you look at, I would say, context of the industry, right? Since the DARPA challenge has been 2 decades now, almost 2 decades, right? So there has been, some meaningful progress, right? When it gets to commercialization, there is nothing out there, right? So driving vehicles are not something that is, pervasive everywhere. And when you look into, why is this the case? So to me, it's really rooted on the technology employed. Right, it's technology that is very hand engineered, that is very capital intensive, that has difficulties really generalizing to solve all the rare cases of things that might happen in the road, right? Where in order to develop and test it, you need large fleets, you need to go on the roads and crank millions of miles, right? So it's not scalable, right? And we need, I believe that we need a different way. We need, a way that is much more effective, that you can develop with a fraction of the cost, right? And that's, what is rooted in creating Waabi is to, instead of looking at this industry from a robotics perspective, look at it from a modern AI-first approach, right? And then you can actually come up with very different solutions, very differentiated technology. And this is what Waabi is doing, is really bringing that next generation of technology, very focused on tracking. And we can talk, about why tracking, which is, I can definitely go on details there. But it really focus on, commercial deployment of this technology, in a safe manner as soon as possible.
Right. So your approach, Waabi World, you've called the ultimate school for self-driving vehicles. Curious if you can explain what that means. How do you teach vehicles to learn?
Yeah. So I think you can make a nice analogy to when as a human you are trying to learn or to learn to drive, right? And there is kind of two aspects of your driving school. There is the learning to drive, right, where the instructor is teaching you into what you should do versus not, right, and it's looking at what you're doing and telling you potentially how you should behave, right? It's also kind of asking you to perform certain maneuvers or bring into specific scenarios because he sees that maybe you're not doing the right thing, in those cases, right? So you need to practice more. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, it's also preparing you for the exam. Right. So oftentimes they actually test you to see that you're ready to indeed take that exam and then go free and then be a driver, right? So the same thing, you can think of it as simulator Waabi World, which is, the reason to build the simulator in the first place is that we need to move away from just testing by driving cranking miles on the real world to a much safer approach where you can really expose the vehicle to all the situations that they might encounter. And these are, situations that are common, but also rare cases, safety critical cases that are very, very difficult or unethical to collect in the real world, right? But in simulation, there is no safety issue, right? So you can actually do it. So that's kind of, why the industry needs. And in terms of what the simulator does is that, it creates those tests automatically so that you can, understand, how well your system is performing, but you need to do it in a way that is like the real world, meaning that your actions of the self-driving vehicle has a reaction in the world. So you understand whether, potentially you compound mistakes, right? And you do it in a way you test the entire software stack. So you need to simulate the sensors, you need to create worlds that look like the real world, etc. And we do this through, this, proprietary AI algorithms that are able to clone the world and replicate and create tests that are very, very realistic that the system has never observed before. So that's in terms of testing, right? And ultimately, what the simulator can also do is that it can tell the brain of the self-driving vehicle whether it's doing the right thing or not, where it's failing, what things should it be doing differently. So it also acts as the teacher, right? And then what you can do is actually learn in simulation to actually behave better, so that by the time you hit the road, you are actually a super proficient, driver, and you really minimize that risk of testing in the real world, which is very, very important and very different from what we observe, what we see in the industry today.
Sure. And I love the comparison to driving school because that's something that everyone can relate to. That makes sense. We got a question from the audience that I wanted to take on that said, the person asked, how can testing and simulation be as effective as testing in the real world? And kind of curious if you can just talk about the pros and cons. Do you need both? And what is the role that each plays?
Yeah, fantastic question. And so the answer is yes, you need both. And the question is, how much do you need on simulation versus how much do you need on real world testing? And if you look at the industry today, because simulators are fairly primitive, they need a lot of road testing, right? So that's where you are actually kind of increasing the risk of something, going wrong on the road, right? And what we are doing with Waabi World is flipping the equation in terms of how much you can do in simulation versus how much you can do in the real world, so that most of the validation verification you do in the simulation, and you only need to do a bit of road testing, to really validate, verify, your simulator. And that's a total game changer in terms of, way to develop, test, validate, safety, make the safety case for this technology. And what are the pros and cons? Well, the first thing is that, current simulators cannot do that. So you need to build a simulator that is the real world, right? And that's difficult, right? It didn't exist before for a reason, right? But that's why we spend, a lot of time at Waabi really thinking about how we can do that and then building that technology. And Waabi World was, it's our production simulator, right? You can see how we actually develop this technology every single day by testing, by learning on that simulator, right? And so that's, one level of difficulty. At the same time, the advantages is that it's much safer, much cheaper. Right. We don't need a large fleet. We don't need big operations. the system can learn on the simulator. So you don't need this hand engineering, tweaking and changing, the algorithms, etc. So suddenly your speed of development and progress is so much faster than anything that we have seen before.
Sure.
And that's been an incredible, I will say, enhancer of the development of the technology and speeding up our development.
Right, interesting. We got some great questions from the audience. I want to take another one to make sure we're answering everyone's questions. This person asks, the proof of the AV pudding is running vehicles safely on test tracks, road, and various ODDs. Given the machine learning systems fail catastrophically in unseen situations, why would an end-to-end machine learning based approach for AVs, such as used by Waabi, be successful?
Yeah. So great question as well. And I think there is maybe some confusion also to clarify here, which is, if you look at, simplistic AI, right? So you need to give a lot of examples in order to handle those situations, right? And typically has difficulties generalizing beyond what we have seen on the training set.
Right.
Now, the technology that's is at the core of our virtual driver, right? The brain of our self-driving vehicles is a new generation of AI algorithms that actually had, a strong generalization capabilities. That means that is rooted in terms of, the technology that forms those, I would say that software stack, that, single system. That is modular and interpretable, that enable us to really, through this new technology, generalize really well to situations that we have never encountered before. Also geographies that we have never seen before.
Right.
Okay, so it's not that the AI cannot, it's that you need to build a new generation of AI algorithms in order to have that generalization. I think at the same time, it's worth to know that the one piece that, I think is difficult for humans is that oftentimes they want machines to be perfect.
Yeah.
But if you're a human driver, it's okay if you make mistakes.
Right.
And I think it's something that, we need to educate the public, that it doesn't mean that you need to be perfect to really be able to make, tremendous positive impact in this world.
Exactly.
Is that if you can reduce that rate of accidents, right?
For sure.
Casualties are going to be much less, and there is tremendous positive feedback, positive benefits, on this technology. And I think that's, oftentimes not understood. And the last bit is that the other thing that is kind of interesting and surprising is that these machines can make mistakes that are very different than the mistakes that humans make.
Okay.
And then they look down because this is very easy for us to do, maybe that particular mistake, but maybe they can handle things that you can't really well. So it's not about that particular mistake. It's about if you integrate over, all the driving is like, are these machines safer? Are you saving lives? And if the answer is yes, then maybe that technology should be on the roads now.
I'm just curious if you could give an example. You say, machines make different mistakes than humans. Obviously, humans, drive sleepy and drive text and drive. Like, what are examples of some of the mistakes that are more common for machines?
So I mean, let's see. Not necessarily I'm gonna say about a mistake or on an error that relates to self-driving. I think I will just put a simple, maybe even classification, right? So oftentimes, you have these machines that can actually tell you, machine learning algorithms, I guess, that can, given a picture, can tell you what it is. Right, and they can do this categorization really well for categories that you have no idea of. That you need to be super deep, botanic or something to really understand these, nuisances and differences, and they can do that tremendously well. And you can't.
Sure.
But then it comes, two animals that are obviously different, and maybe they actually make a mistake, and they confuse them. Right, and so that's that's kind of the analogy, right? So sometimes you can see these things as well on in the self-driving field as well. Sure. Right? But what is important is that you have a proper way to assess the how good your system is, right? And that you do it in a way that is backed up by data, very scientific, right? In this, right? You make your safety case, and then you can say that actually the risk of this vehicle on the road is much lower than a human, and therefore I want to deploy this. And in doing this, what is missing or was missing in the industry before is the ability to do this offline in simulation. And this is one of the things I'm very excited actually to provide our simulator potentially to regulators to be able to, have a test exam for any self-driving company.
Right. Interesting. You were quoted saying that AVs will change the world as we know it once solved at scale. But there are obviously big challenges that we need to get there to overcome that. Curious if you can talk about what you see as the biggest challenges that the industry still needs to address, and which of those challenges do you find to be the most difficult to resolve?
Yeah, this is another fantastic question. And I would say there is like 3 different areas or challenges or whatever you want to call them, right? That this I guess field needs to move forward or push forward. The first one is where there's a technical challenge, right? The fact that the solution to self-driving doesn't exist today. That's why we don't see any product out there, right? So there is still the need to actually build that scalable solution that will be safer than humans, right? So that's first challenge is, is that technology, is this technology going to happen or not? And at Waabi, we believe that, we have the answer to this, right? And as we are heads down, developing this. The second one is about building trust, right? And this comes about the adoption of this technology, right? And this is where, I think education is extremely important. I think organizations like yours are doing a fantastic job at really building, help build that trust and educate, everyone out there in terms of, what these systems do and don't. And what do they struggle with versus not, etc. So I think that's a very, very important part. And also in this education, it's not just about the general public. I think there is working with regulators so that you can develop the technology in a safe manner, right? And also the potential customers that this is actually technology they would like to have. And in tracking, in terms of customers, is great because there is a chronic shortage of drivers. And fleet shippers, they understand autonomy is the only solution. Right. So they're really looking for this to happen, right? So now in robotaxis, last mile delivery is a little bit more difficult, perhaps. That area that is still, whether the population would use it or not.
For sure.
And last bit is the unit economics, right? Is that, let's not forget this. Oftentimes in this industry, people think that if I solve it, I can build a successful business, and absolutely not, right? It's about, what is the type of technology that you're developing, how it scales, and what is the cost of what you're doing. It's going to play a very significant role in terms of will that technology be deployed. So I would say the 3 things are, still challenges or things that the industry needs to continue working on.
For sure. Yeah, I think you're right that economics is often overlooked. Okay, and I want to go back to the education point because that's so near and dear to PAVE's heart. We are so grateful for Waabi's partnership and our education efforts. There are obviously a lot of challenges in the public engagement space with AVs. I'm curious what you think are the best ways to build public trust.
Yeah, so let's see. So there's a few ways I think that, are important. I think exposing the public to this technology, I think is important, right? So that you demystify what it is. Yeah. And one example is, I don't know whether you remember the first time that you took a subway, a train, or something that was autonomous, right? I remember it was in an airport many years ago. And the first time I saw it, it's like, oh, wow, I'm not going to trust this thing. And after you do it, once, twice, you don't think anymore. Of course, this is safe, this is great. Right, so I think the exposure to the product is important. I think there is also an important education component in terms of how we educate everybody in terms of again what the technology is, and we can do it in many different forums. Whether as an educator, really, this is something I really care about. Right, exactly. In terms of really explaining, in terms that everybody can understand what the technology is and what are the benefits, what can do versus not. So be much more accountable as well into this I would say this industry has lacked transparency and accountability, and that's not necessarily being a good thing at all, right? So we need to change that, and I hope that really Waabi will lead the pack in terms of being much more trustworthy and accountable. And I also believe that this is maybe more for the more technical folks, but showcasing what the technology is in more details, publishing papers, showing the stuff to the world is very important as well, so that people understand, okay, what we are building and why is next generation, for example. Right?
Exactly. And earlier on, you kind of alluded to the trucking and why trucking is a good place. I'm curious if you can talk a little bit more about that. What makes AV trucking a attractive sector for the AV industry growth?
Yeah, and over, I guess, the course of my career, I worked in self-driving trucks for many years, as well as passenger cars. And so there is a couple of reasons why trucking, is really our application of choice. From one perspective, is that there is a real business need for this, right? So we all live, in the middle of a logistics crisis. Supply chain is extremely disrupted. There is a need to move loads, and there is not enough truck drivers. And the shortage of truck drivers is getting much worse every year. So that's, more humans is not a solution,
right,
particularly for middle mile, which is, what we're focusing on, which is longer stretches of highways where people need to go, on a trip for, weeks at a time. Is really not a great, life to have, right? It's very hard to have a family. Oftentimes it's even difficult to have access to showers, really simple things that, are human dignity, right? So it's a hard job, very hard job, right? So, new folks, young people don't want to take that job. That's why we see this chronic shortage of drivers, right? So, and there is an understanding that autonomy is the solution. And autonomy, what it's doing here is enhancing humans, not displacing them, right? So that humans can actually take the last mile delivery where they can, go back home every day and have a better life, right? So that's how we, why we see this is, our automation is to enhance humans, not displace humans. So that's from the perspective of business, right? And I mentioned before, shippers, fleets, which are our customers, really understand that, they need more, more drivers. They cannot realize the potential of the full business. So this is, essential for their, continuation, right, or success of their business. So everybody is kind of aligned in terms of, there is a need for this technology. At the same time, if you look at the technical challenges, mostly you need to drive on highways, which are, more structured. It's still very difficult to do, but it's more structured than cities. Right. And from that perspective, building a product that is safe is easier in this domain than it would be in, I live in Toronto, which is, I guess, the New York City of Canada, right? It's so hard to drive here. It's crazy. Right.
Right.
And if you look at, when you take, an Uber, a Lyft, whatever your favorite is, most of the time they need to park, to pick you up or drop you off illegally. Self-driving vehicles cannot do that. So there is an infrastructure question in terms of, okay, do we need to change our cities? We can't really change, right? So how are we going to bring this technology in a way that, we can actually deploy it? In trucking, have to have model, for example, is something that exists. You have infrastructure. So all the pieces are there, right? If you can really, solve this technology, bring that product to the market, there is, adoption that is going to happen.
Those are all great points. And I think you're exactly right that the last few years, people in the public have thought more about the supply chain than in the last 50 years combined. It's really, I think, got a new appreciation for how things get to us. We have gotten a few questions about all the news in the AV industry recently. I'm curious what your reaction is, Argo and Too Simple and all these different stories. What is your reaction to all this and what that means for the AV industry?
Yeah, so without going obviously into particulars, but I think, it's always, sad to hear news of, one of the, kind of pioneer companies, going down, right? We have, many friends in the industry that work at those companies. So that's definitely, dear to heart, I would say. At the same time, I think, if you look at the industry today, so there is this, kind of feeling of winter of AV, right? This feeling of, negative sentiment that we see on the press out there, for example, right? And I will say that this is associated with previous generation of technology. I think there has been a lot of promises that, but we haven't seen that product, right? There is, these current solutions are extremely capital intensive, right? Some of these players have a burn rate per year of 500 million, a billion, more than a billion. And when you still are a long way from really deploying a product, it's hard to continue sustaining that burn rate, particularly in markets, right, and the economy of today. So we are seeing, some changes, I guess, some consolidation in the industry, and it's definitely sad to see. At the same time, what we are seeing is, well, people are still very excited about self-driving and, and what it's going to bring to the table, right? So it's not that has changed, but there is an understanding that maybe that generation will not get us there, that we need something else. And then when you look around and it's, okay, who's going to bring this, this new technology? And what is in everybody's mind is like Waabi and this next generation AI first, much more scalable, flexible, where you can do it with a fraction of the cost. And then it's really putting a lot of extremely positive sentiment, in players like us. So we see, previous generation having difficulties, new generation really racing quickly. And this is from all the partners and potential partners, from the talent in the industry or people that are looking into maybe coming into this industry, as well as investors that are very excited about what this represents and really the next chapter. They're looking for the next chapter in self-driving.
For sure. One of the unique things about Waabi is that you have operations both in Canada, you mentioned you're in Toronto, and in the US. We have spent a lot of time on our 100 panels talking about kind of the challenges in the US. I'm curious if you can just compare kind of the AV ecosystem in the two places. Like what are the similarities or differences or the unique challenges?
Yeah. So we are, I guess, a proud Canadian company, headquartered in Toronto. So from day one, we have offices in, California as well as Toronto. So we definitely identify that these are two great ecosystems. In Toronto, in Canada, you have the AI talent. The revolution of AI, happened in 2012 here, right? And you have, incredible, talent and the ecosystem. At the same time, a lot of the self-driving, I will say, knowledge comes from, most of the companies are in the US, right, or very US centric. So that's why we identify, from a talent perspective, these two hubs are, very, very important for us. Now, as it relates to, regulation, for example, the US is more advanced than Canada. It pains me to say that, but it's what it is. And, I think there is many more, states where you can really deploy this technology. They are really thinking of, the benefits and definitely ahead of the game. I think Canada, there is definitely a lot of positive excitement about it. There is still, leg room that needs to happen. And then we are seeing, a lot of motions and things happening right now. So that's, that's exciting. And then from the point of view perspective of deployment, right, if you look at the Sunnyvale, for example, right, nice weather, big roads, that's much easier to deploy in the US than when you look at Canada. We have beautiful winters. I'm from Spain originally, and every winter I ask myself, really, Raquel, Canada? So is weather is a thing. Geography is a thing. It's more difficult. So we are focusing on operations right now in the US. But definitely, I want to bring this technology to Canada. No question about it.
For sure. And I also want to, PAVE got a very generous grant from Transport Canada this year to start PAVE Canada. So I also want to give Transport Canada huge credit for their commitment to public education of babies. We are almost out of time. So my last question, I just wanted to ask, what's next for Waabi? What are your goals or dreams, or what do you, where's Waabi going?
Yeah, great. So I would say that, there is some really, really exciting things coming up, from Waabi side very soon. And I would say stay tuned, because you're going to be surprised. You're going to be very, very excited. So I would just leave it there.
Wonderful. Great. Well, Really appreciate all that you've done and really just love talking to you today and getting to know you. So thank you for joining us for PAVE's 100th virtual panel. Thanks to the audience for joining us today and for all of your great questions. And if you would like more information, visit us at pavecampaign.org. Thank you all. We'll see you next time.
Thank you, Tara.
Thank you.